I recently made a video on the importance of being seen. And after thinking about that video for a while, I realized that it actually just begs the question. Two questions, actually. And those two questions are, what are you hiding and why are you hiding it? I think if you consider the fact that most of us have difficulty being seen in some way or another, it's not enough to understand that. You have to dig a bit deeper and ask the bigger questions, because then the answers will help you to understand more about yourself and how you operate. I think for all of us, the common theme here is that we all know we have difficulty being seen. But I think if we each dig a little bit deeper, we'll probably find that the secret to the answers lies in our childhood experiences. I've shared this before here on this channel, and I think we all understand this, but when we're younger, we really are our true, authentic selves. We want to be who we are. We're innocent in that desire. We don't know any better, right? We come into a world where we don't understand. It can be a world that's not always receptive to who we are. It's a world where people can be cruel and mean, and it takes a while to understand that. So I think when we come into the world, we start out who we want to be. And I think that's the case for children in general. Most children just kind of put it out there as who they are because they haven't learned not to. So for me, since I'm the one doing the reflecting here, and I would encourage all of you to ask yourselves these two questions. What are you hiding and why? For me, growing up the way I did, which I've shared here, I grew up with an abusive father. And I realized early on that he would look for opportunities to mock or belittle my emotions. So I learned as a child that my emotions were what was being exploited. So he would watch me, and if I would cry at certain things or show anger at certain things, he was ready to exploit that and to mock it or to remember it for a later time. I would watch, TV shows, and I would cry when it was sad, just even showing anger in some cases about things. But he was always there to observe and to twist it and to use it to further hurt me with it. So we all have different experiences growing up. That's not going to be everyone's experience, of course, but that was mine. So what it taught me early on was that my emotions were something that I should hide. It wasn't necessarily my thoughts, because I didn't put my thoughts out there at that young age and get mocked in that. And that might be the case for you, right? That's something that you have to consider. But for me, it was my emotions. And so I thought as a young child, I didn't think, it was just, again, it's this just showing who I was, that showing emotion in such a way was okay, right? I was just who I was. So I was just basically being me. So if I saw something that made me sad or upset, I would cry. I would show my sadness in that way. And I didn't know any better. But as I got older and started putting the pieces together, I realized, even though I couldn't have explained it to you the way I can now, right? Like, I obviously knew it was happening subconsciously, which is why I hid. I didn't have the tools at the time to really put it all out there and to make sense of it in a way that I could explain it to someone else. But I knew it was happening because I started hiding. That was the proof that I understood, even though I couldn't make sense of it in some kind of tangible way. So what I started to do was hide my emotions. And I look back and I find it interesting because I didn't necessarily stop crying when I was with people or when I saw something sad. But there was a marked difference in how I showed my emotions as I got older. So if I would go to a movie, let's say, and there was a scene in the movie that really touched me in a way that I wanted to cry, or if, I had a bad experience in life with somebody that made me angry or emotional in some way, I truly sought to hide that, or to hide the byproduct of that, which was usually tears and some kind of emotional display. I remember being at a wedding one time, and there was a moment in the wedding that really touched me emotionally. And I got up and I went to the bathroom because I knew I was going to lose control of my emotions and that I was going to cry. And I didn't want to do that in front of anyone. Because again, I learned to guard that part of myself. My emotions became a very private thing that I didn't want to put on display to anyone else. Now, there's a difference between, let's say, an interaction with somebody where they were telling me something about their life and then they would start crying. I clearly remember as a younger woman going to the veterinarian's office one time. I may have even shared this story in another video. Who knows? I can't half remember what I say sometimes. But anyway, I just remember that it was, the typical experience that we all have, right? I'm bringing in my cat to the veterinarian, and yet the vet tech is in there all of a sudden telling me about how she just lost her cat, right? So I'm being the counselor. And so she just starts explaining about her cat, and while I'm waiting to be seen by the vet, she had a little necklace on with a locket on it that had some significance with her cat, and she just started crying her eyes out. And I felt her emotion. I felt her sadness. And I actually cried. Like, I teared up and I cried. But I was crying her tears, if that makes any sense. I was feeling what she was feeling. And those tears weren't necessarily from my inner being. They were more a response to what she was giving me. So she was crying, and then I cried because I could feel her sadness. But it wasn't my tears. And so I felt okay doing that. And I always did feel okay doing that. If someone would open up to me, and if they would be angry, I could show them my anger. Or if they would be sad and cry, I could cry with them. But in my mind, that was okay, because that wasn't my emotions necessarily, right? That was just me reflecting or feeling someone else's emotions. So for me, the tears that I hid were those that were from my emotions and feelings. Those were the tears that I hid. So I was hiding my emotional response from people because I knew and had learned from experience that that could be used to further wound me. And it made me, as I grew up, more suspicious of emotion, to the point that I didn't trust it as much. That I knew that emotions were something that could be made fun of, not understood, not appreciated. And again, it would be interesting to hear your experiences, because perhaps it was different for you, right? Perhaps you were sharing your thoughts at a young age, and that was what was mocked in your life, or that was what was not understood, and so you decided to hide your thoughts. For me, it was hiding my emotions, because that was the fragile part of me. And it was made more fragile by the abuse I suffered, by the way that they were taken and just twisted so greatly. So I kind of put a shell around my emotions and didn't want anyone else to see them. I hid them. And now I know why I hid them. And so I have to say that today, my thoughts, or sharing my thoughts, while it is difficult at times, and yes, I am sensitive about sharing my thoughts freely unless I feel that they will be received in some way. I don't think I'm as sensitive about that as I am about showing my emotions. Emotions from my heart. And I even have difficulty sometimes, even in front of loved ones, Not as much now, but it did take me a while to work on that, to the point where I felt comfortable showing my tears in front of a loved one. Because a lot of times I want to kind of run away, like if I feel the tears coming on, I just want to go somewhere else until I can either, get myself together or maybe just let a few tears out so that I feel like I can come back to the situation and be more in control of myself in that way. So basically what it boils down to is that I have felt, because of my upbringing, that my emotions were a weakness. And that was brought about because of my father. And again, this is why it's so important when you look into who you are and want to discover things about yourself. Again, I said this at the beginning, but you have to really go back to when you were younger, because that's when a lot of these problems start. And not just for us, for everyone in general. Your childhood are very formative years, and you are taught things which you will, for good or bad, you will struggle with for the rest of your life in one way or the other. And so for me, I grew up with a father who didn't appreciate my emotions. And he did the exact opposite. He used them as fuel for further abuse. So for me, emotions are something to be guarded, and that's what I've learned. It wasn't so much the thoughts. And then, of course, as I got older, because of that, I put less value on emotional things or emotions in general, and I put more emphasis or I put more value on the thinking side of myself. What's interesting, because I was sort of a dichotomy in that way. Because I think people in my life who would observe me, they would probably see me as an emotional person in a way, or maybe compassionate. Because like I said, I wasn't afraid to cry with someone. I wasn't afraid to show or share in whatever emotion someone was presenting to me. So other people would look at me and say, oh, she's emotional. When honestly, I was a person who was just responding to what was in my environment or what was around me. What I really valued was the thoughts. And that's what I grew up thinking. And I think this also led to me rejecting comfort from another. So much so that I actually convinced myself at one point in my life that I didn't need it. That I didn't need someone else's comfort. That I didn't need someone else's pity. And that wasn't true either. But again, we have this way of responding to things in extreme ways. And so for me, I just had to reject it all, right? It's like I rejected all kinds of emotion in that way because it was something I learned. So I rejected it to the point that I didn't even want someone else's comfort. And it's only as I've gotten older and have gotten more balance in my life that I'm realizing that I do value the comfort of someone else, that I do wish to be vulnerable with someone in that way. That was something that I shied away from, and it was something that I really dreaded, was someone taking pity on me in some way. I actually felt like I was stronger alone. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. That was something that I probably had to go through in order to get the balance in my life. Again, it's these learning through extremes. We learn through extremes. So for me, to kind of reject comfort in the times when I needed it the most was a way to see what I was made of. And I was strong. I could be strong. But it's interesting now, that I'm getting older. I kind of desire more not to have to be that way. In the past, I would tell my loved ones not to say anything to me. Like if I knew I was in an emotional state or something had happened, even something like a pet dying, I would not want someone to talk to me, I would go hide and cry. And I didn't want anyone to see that. I just didn't want to be vulnerable with anyone in that way, because that's what I had learned. And again, when you learn something, you kind of end up living a little bit in a delusion, because to protect yourself, you have to convince yourself that that's what you want. And that's what I did. I convinced myself that that's what I wanted, that I didn't need comfort in that way, that I didn't need to be vulnerable with someone in an emotional way. I truly believe for a long time that I did not need that I was better off without it. And I was trying to be some kind of strong individual that could just, and I don't want to say repress my emotions, because I didn't necessarily do that, but I didn't want to share them with anyone else. And that's kind of selfish in a way. I was denying myself the beauty of a human experience by telling myself that. I was actually denying myself something beautiful by not allowing myself to be vulnerable with someone in an emotional way. And I've realized how much I've missed by doing that to myself. So as I get older, I wouldn't say I want to be more emotional, but I want to be more vulnerable in my emotions. I want to be able to sit with another and be real in showing how I feel, whatever that may be. Whatever emotion I may be feeling at that time, I want to be honest, and I want to be real. And I want to show that part of myself to another. It's my gift to someone else. I want to be vulnerable with someone else in that way. And I think I'll receive the same in return. That's a beautiful interaction. That's what good relationships are made of. And I am having that more in my life with my loved ones. I am opening up more, and I am showing my emotional side more without feeling like I need to hide that from them. Because again, by doing that, I'm just denying something beautiful. I'm denying a new level in the relationship that could exist if only I were vulnerable in such a way. And so for me now, I have been doing that. And it's not so much that I seek a certain type of comfort when doing it. It's not necessarily what I get in return for doing it. It's more about doing it. It's more about the gift in it. Because I see it as a gift, a part of me that I freely give to someone else. And I have been experiencing it in those relationships. I am becoming more vulnerable, and the returns have been splendid. It works. It really does work. The more you give, the more you get. And it's about discernment. I've said this before. There has to be some level of trust there. So you have to be careful with who you share yourself with in that way. Not because you fear what could happen as much, but it's more about something else. What it says is that I'm learning to respect myself and care about myself, that I've learned something about myself, that I no longer have to hide my emotions in such a way. Not because I'm afraid of what will happen, but because it's something of myself that I give to another as a symbol. And that's what we have to ask ourselves. What are we hiding, and why are we hiding it? Because I think to answer that question is to unlock something inside of yourself. Because if you can recognize what you're hiding, realize what created that in your life that has made you hide in such a way, then you won't fear it anymore. It's not something to be afraid of when you've confronted it yourself. For me to realize that I was hiding my emotions, my emotional responses, and to realize why I was doing it, because I was taught that as a child, is to realize that that no longer has a hold over me. That I'm not ashamed And that's the thing. I think a lot of this stems from some kind of sense of shame. That you have been made to feel ashamed of who you are. And so now I'm no longer ashamed. I realize that it's okay to have emotional responses. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just who I am. And then to be able to see that who I am is a gift and to give it to someone else. That's a good feeling. It means I've learned something about me. And what I would love today is for you to learn something about you. Ask yourself, what are you hiding? And why are you hiding it? I wish you all the best as you discover the answers to those questions.